You're listening to Design Between the Lines, the only design and home furnishings podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers, industry innovators, and lifetime legends of the home furnishings industry. It's here that I get a chance to sit and chat with the influencers shaping the industry into what it is today. Recording here at the Point, live, this High Point Fall Market, with a natural eye for the elegant and learned appreciation of all history's influential design. Gary Inman has become a respected and instrumental force in the home furnishings industry today. He is currently the Vice President of Hospitality for Baskerville, where his work is revered as transcendent of style and trends. As an author, as well as a designer, Gary's work has been published in Veranda, House Beautiful, LA Decor, The Washington Post, Southern Accents, Traditional Home, Hotel Design, and Home and Design, among others. As a professor of design history at the Virginia Commonwealth University, home of the Spiders, I know he wants to promote that, much of Gary's career also revolves around the education and guidance of young designers as he helps them reach their full potential. Gary, welcome.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
Great to have you here today. Right after Michael blew through High Point, you're blowing in, apparently.
Yes, I was here yesterday to embrace Michael.
I understand you and I are both sharing no power at home.
No power, no showers.
Well, let me take you back to a basic question because of where you are today. What attracted you to the world of design as you were growing up?
You know, I always love that question because I really credit my grandmother with planting the seeds. She was a woman of great fashion. She loved gardening. She loved entertaining. And I just remember being maybe 4 years old and seeing beautiful fabrics and touching those beautiful fabrics. And I think I was hooked then. And then it was kind of solidified. I was in Winston-Salem. My mother took me, I was 3.5 years old, but I still remember it so clearly, to the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company Tower, their headquarters, designed by Lamb out of New York, who designed the Empire State Building about 2 years later. And I just remember touching those elevator doors and looking at my mother and saying, pretty. And I think that was it. I think the deal was sealed. It was
sold.
I was sold. I was going to do something in design. I wanted to be involved with that. So.
Well, that was your biggest inspiration at the time. Were there any, as you were growing up, any mentors that kind of helped you along the way? I know you've done others yourself these days.
Yeah, you know, early on, I think my mentors were people that I admired and I could read about. Jackie Kennedy was a powerful force in my life. I was just a child when he was president, when Mr. Kennedy was president. But I saw her every day, and it was almost like the aunt that you just didn't see at the family social because she was just such an important part of my life. And her appreciation of the arts, the way she dressed, really encouraged me to embrace those things. She made them seem very important to everyone. I still remember the tour of the White House, and that said to me, design's very important. If the First Lady is telling us that's important, I just, you know, as a child was very receptive to that. And I still, all these years later, admire her greatly. I think there's probably never been another style arbiter quite like Jackie Kennedy.
Very true. Well, let's talk about your education. As you were growing up and you've made this decision, this is kind of a direction in your life. How did your education go? Did that help support it? Were you going a different direction than you changed? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Certainly. I started here in North Carolina. I was actually at UNCG in Greensboro. And if you're old enough, you remember that back in the 80s, North Carolina had a tremendous textile industry, and a lot of the high fashion products were made here. And I just remember being at UNCG and going on field trips and seeing Ralph Lauren and Perry Ellis and Calvin Klein and all these products being produced. And at the time, I was studying fashion design and really started my career in fashion. And then went on a field trip to New York City. FIT was one of the stops on the tour.
Wow.
And I remember saying to myself, oh, what am I doing in Greensboro? I want to be in New York, and within 6 months I was at FIT studying there. So I was able to finish my degree in New York and then work in the fashion on the Garment Center. So that was really the beginning. And
So
it's
you
always
really
been a
got
great
the nuts
beginning.
and bolts down there, which is great.
Absolutely. And, fashion is still something that's very important to me. I've been telling friends, that have an interest in fashion that it's wonderful, but it's a little bit neurotic. And I just remember having so many friends who were getting into drugs. We were all working 16, 17-hour days. It was nonstop. One collection would be going down the runway, and you felt the stress of the next collection. So if it wasn't resort, spring, summer, and there was always a new collection.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had to kind of reinvent yourself.
Oh, my gosh.
And I loved the frenzy of it and the sort of pace of it, but I wanted a little bit more. I think I wanted a little more longevity. I wanted to design something that I felt could stand the test of time. I probably thought back to that tower in Winston-Salem and how much that moved me a century after it had been built.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be a part of that part of the industry that was maybe not something that the moment it goes down the runway, it starts to depreciate.
Well, all right. So you got into fashion and so forth. So what was your next step? I understand. Well, now you've kind of, how did you find your way to hospitality? Really,
Sure.
You're there in fashion and so forth. So what were the next steps involved?
Yeah, it was a very interesting pathway. I was tossing about a bit. I'd worked for a couple of different fashion companies, and I'd had the privilege of working with people like Vivienne Westwood and Mary McFadden and Liz
Wonderful.
Claiborne. And I was frustrated by the fact that I was doing all this work and I was getting absolutely no recognition. And I've always kind of felt that artists deserve to certainly have some role in the appreciation of their art. So
Yeah.
I was really tossing about, not quite knowing what to do. We hired a decorator to do our apartment in New York, Lucian Therian, who was the first great mentor I've had in my life. And the process was so enjoyable. And I just remember one day I said, Lucian, I love what you're doing. Can I work with you? And that was the career switch. He fortunately said yes, and he taught me so much. I traipsed around New York with him, going to the design center, going to antique dealers, and was really in awe of what he was able to do. And that was the pathway. He had done Peacock Alley at the Waldorf Astoria.
Oh, wow.
He did Gloria Vanderbilt's apartment on Fifth Avenue. So, I mean, he had these monumental projects, but the hotel piece fascinated me tremendously because that's a place people for generations, that's where you meet friends if you want to have an elegant cocktail. Let's
Yes.
meet at let's meet at Peacock Alley. Let's go to the Waldorf.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it really gave me a good solid foundation.
So you got into that end of the business. You're doing good. You got a good solid foundation, as you mentioned. So how did you make it from there to Baskerville?
Yeah, my journey in life's been very circuitous. I guess I didn't plan well, but I've always been a person who believes you show up, you speak up, and if you do that often enough, things will come together. So I ended up in Richmond to go to graduate school. I did my master's at VCU School of the Arts in art history. Great school, and I've had the privilege of teaching there. And then I went off to UVA to do my doctoral work in architectural history.
Wow.
Stayed in school for about 10 years, really just focused on learning and really wanting to know everything about design I possibly could. And then went back into practice, had my own practice for 11 years, worked with a small regional firm for 9 years. So I really paid my dues to get to Baskerville.
Yeah.
3.5 years ago, the timing was just right. I ended up there, and I've never looked back. It's really an extraordinary firm, 121 years of practice.
I had no idea it was that long.
Seventh oldest firm in America, and
Wow.
something I'm extremely proud of, that achievement.
You're vice president there. I heard the words brand ambassador. Tell
Yeah,
me about what that is.
Part of my role is to be their brand ambassador, and when I arrived there 3.5 years ago, I felt they had the most remarkable story to share. Architects sometimes tend to be a bit modest about sharing their stories. I think interior designers tend to approach the marketing of their product, their service, more like a fashion designer. But architects can be a bit stodgy and a little bit overly academic. So I started advocating gently for let's tell our story in a more impactful way. Let's update our website. And I started speaking on every panel that I could get on. I just wanted to get the voice of Baskerville out into the world. And so I was fortunate. People kept inviting me, and I kept being on more and more panels. And so that role just really emerged of being a brand ambassador. I think to do that successfully, you have to believe in the brand. So it really started with a long veneration of this firm. I'd known them for 20 years. Never dreamed I would work there.
Yeah. So Gary, we talked about being a brand ambassador, your time as a vice president currently, and all of what you've done beautifully to develop who you are today. So tell me a little bit about your design process, where it is now, and how you can express that to others. Tell me about your design process.
Certainly. Design process is something that fascinates me, and I love working with young designers who are in the process of discovering what that process will be for them. And the one thing that I always advise, because it's been the foundation of my practice for 20, whatever years,
Yeah.
for a while now, is storytelling. I think storytelling is the most powerful thing in our culture. It's the earliest thing that we know from history. Storytellers were painting the walls of caves, and we know that every child begs their parents for stories at bedtime. We love stories. So I always wanted to create an experience for the guest in the hotels, or if it's a private residence, also to make those guests feel welcome through creating a story around the life of the owners or around the brand for the hotel. It works incredibly well with historic properties. I've been privileged to work on a number of those. And I think that's probably the thing I'm the best known for in the industry. And it brings me some really interesting opportunities because I'm specifically selected because, he's a great storyteller. He'll help us bring this to life.
This to me is perfection, because we've had some people on Design Between the Lines who've mentioned the story. It's about the story. It seems to be even more important these days than it ever has been in the furniture world.
Absolutely. In furniture and hotels, across the board, everyone's wanting an experience. And there's a new word, as we all know, experiential design, yes, that we're hearing constantly. It's actually a focus of Hospitality at Market, this event here in High Point on Sunday and Monday.
Wonderful.
So storytelling, I'm glad to see it so elevated. I've been preaching that for over a quarter of a century now, because I've always felt like it was a great foundation, because it's not just about a product or a trend or a color. It's really about taking those things which are very important and the trends which are also important, but manipulating them into a way of telling and creating an experience.
So is this where this term that I'm a little bit unfamiliar with, but I think you know a lot about, is this where narrative design comes in?
Yes, narrative design is a term that I helped coin and started putting out into the world at conferences like NeoCon and
Yes.
HD and so forth, because I wanted people to think about design not just as a visual art, but as a narrative art. Mm-hmm. You can use imagery, and we see this in great films. Some of the most poignant films in history, the thing you sometimes remember the most are the settings, the costumes, sometimes it's automobiles.
Yeah.
That visual tapestry is a character within the film, and sometimes within even a television series. Sex and the City comes to mind.
Oh, yes.
The city of New York, fashion, the sort of nightlife of the city was one of the main characters in that very successful.
What a palette to paint a picture
What a
with.
palette. So, I think people in film, people in fashion, and increasingly people in product design, furniture design, really understand that the story is key.
Well, you now developed a number of collections, I'm sure, for Baskerville, and you're working on more. Tell me a bit about what your favorite collections you've designed are.
Well, my personal collections, I did love the fashions I did, and I've lived long enough now that I'm starting to see those be vintage.
Okay.
I went to a party in New York about a year ago, and this really beautiful young woman in her 20s walked in, and I kept looking at the outfit she was wearing, and I thought, gosh, that seems familiar. And I finally walked up to her and I said, I think you're wearing my top. And it was a very odd moment, and she thought, is this guy a drag queen, or what's going on here? And I said, no, I think I designed your top. And so she had her friend look at the label, and it turned out to be a piece I designed.
Oh my gosh.
20 plus years ago. And
Wow.
she said, we just love all this vintage fashion.
Oh
and,
my gosh.
So it was both flattering and
Yeah.
a little bit
Made your day, right?
made
Yeah.
my day. Made my day. It was a little bit of a reality check. The collections I did for Moore Council, I was really proud of those. I do have a new collection that I'm working on that I can't identify yet because we're not ready to make the announcement, but you'll be seeing it at High Point in 2019.
Great.
Luxury collection and furniture, obviously, and I'm terribly excited about that.
Congratulations in advance, but I'm not going to say break a leg because that'll jinx it. I think we can't wait. That's what I can say. Your role as professor, we talked about VCU. I'd love to hear about how you feel, what you feel the significance is to you personally about helping guide and shape minds of young designers. I'd really like to hear your insight.
Well, I really feel obligated. I grew up feeling like if you're given things and people support you, you have to do that in return. I just feel like it's the right thing to do. Once I started teaching at VCU, it really fueled my own passion for design. And what I grew to love is seeing the young designers I was mentoring. A lot of them then came into my firm. I hire a lot of people. I've hired a lot of people in my roles from VCU and other schools, but VCU in particular because of my connections there. And I love seeing them go from being a student to being a young designer. And 3 years in, they're starting to find their own voice. 4 or 5 years in, I'm so impressed by what they're doing. And it's always flattering as well when you hear them talking about design and I hear my language coming back. And I see in their work some element that I know I helped plant that in their vocabulary. But it's different. And it helps us with the evolution of design. And I think we always have to invest in that next generation of creativity. We're none of us going to live forever.
Well, yeah, exactly.
There's an end to it at some point. The things I believe in strongly, I want to see those things go on, and investing in young people, I think, is the way to make that happen.
Well, Gary, do you consider that among all the other things that you've done, the wonderful collections, both in fashion and others, do you see that as one of your major successes?
I absolutely do. I was chatting with a friend recently. Mindy Carter is a designer that I worked with. She was an intern through VCU with me. She worked with me for several years at my old firm. We've just been great friends. She still texts me, I'm looking for, who do you suggest for this? But her work is spectacular.
Wonderful.
She's become incredibly successful. And I just love that relationship. I feel so good about that. I feel like I made a difference in her career. There's another young designer I'm working with now who works with me on all my hotel projects, Danny Frazier. We just co-authored a house together that was published, and obviously I wanted to share the limelight with her, and seeing her in print for the first time, there's a feeling of pride there.
Yes.
And a feeling of knowing that you've made the difference in someone else's life.
Now comes the good question.
Yes.
The meat and potatoes question. Everybody has failures and successes, and we'll call them learning experiences and failures. So what would you say is one of your crazy stories of a learning experience you had all the way through your career this far? Was there one of those that you go, boy, I thought that was going to be a big one, and it just kind of went off the cliff?
Yes, there are definitely those. I heard a lecture recently by a really top-notch designer, and he said, I was fired 10 times. And he was talking about how difficult this career can be. I've had a couple of projects along the way that didn't go well. Yeah. It was the wrong chemistry match with the client. And I think we've all had this. I once had a hotel project, and thousands of yards of a wall covering came in, and someone had changed the SKU, and it was the wrong design. And so suddenly you have rolls and rolls and rolls of wallpaper or wall vinyl that you can't install. So, I think we've all had some of those lessons. The biggest lesson and the biggest obstacle I had was staying at the wrong firm for too long. And I always say to young designers, really try to align yourself with people that you respect their design process. Go in, be open, be receptive, try to learn as much as you can from them. But there comes a time when you need to move on to continue to grow.
Right.
And I say to people, don't be afraid to make the change. Step out. It will typically advance your career in ways you could not have imagined.
Gary, we talked about it a little earlier ago in the interview. We talked about the upcoming collection rolling out in the spring market in High Point. So in that respect, let's talk a little bit about trends right now. What do you see as the trends currently in the industry, the furniture industry, and where do you see them heading in the next 6 months or so?
Yeah, I always love the trend questions. You know, it's getting harder and harder to be a trend guru because everything is happening so much faster now because we're all connected second by second through Instagram and all the social media platforms. One of the things that I see that I think is an important trend is this bridging between entertainment / hospitality and residential. You know, there's a sort of a cross-pollination, and I love hearing that because I've worked in both of those markets. I think the lines between fashion and design, interior design / architecture, and furniture design, lighting design, all those are blurring. I really see these sort of visual stories being told, and many people now, as you know, are working on multiple collections. I look at someone like Barclay Bouter as a friend and someone I admire, and Barclay's touched almost every category of product. He's done exceptionally well with those. Kelly Wersler is a colleague that I value. I always think of her as the Lady Gaga of design.
Yes.
You know, she's really got such a great aesthetic and such a great vibe. And those voices emerging, I think, is a key part of our industry. For a long time, fashion had stars. They were almost, I would say, on equal footing with film stars or musicians, but not so much interior designers weren't looked at in that way, and product designers. I think that's a big trend for me, is the process of storytelling and creating your own brand and identifying your own brand through social media is allowing people to create a story about who they are, what they believe in, their view of the world. And I see that as an interesting trend in design. I think it's a positive thing.
Great. So let's think about this for a second. I'm going to ask you what's new for you, but in respect to what you're doing, not what you're creating, but what you're doing. And I know what you're doing here involves something Sunday and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing here in High Point this fall market?
Absolutely. I'm always here looking for resources for clients, but 3 years ago, I had a chance to help initiate a new program called Hospitality at Market. And we've had, I think, extraordinary success in those 3 years. This year, we will have incredibly important speakers from our industry. Benjamin West will be here, which is the top purchasing agency in the world.
Wonderful.
We have Hilton here. We have Marriott here, IHG. We have Wilson Associates out of Dallas, one of the top 10 design firms. And of course, my colleagues from Baskerville will be here. So there's really this coming together of some of the top people in the industry, seeing High Point in a new light.
Wow.
I kept advocating for years, why would you specify product you haven't seen? Because most of the industry trade shows, you see a few pieces of product, and then it's more about networking, which is always important, of course, but lots of networking occurs here. But the difference is we have 80,000 50,000 square foot showrooms where you're immersed in the culture and the brand. And so that's been my message to people, and I think it's starting to resonate.
Yes.
And I really feel like in another year or two will be the it event for hospitality, that this is something you must do. So I'm doing all of that. I do have meetings with a couple of manufacturers for new collections. I'm moderating 2 panels, sitting on a third.
You're just sitting around doing nothing.
You know, sitting around doing nothing, and really enjoying it all because I love being involved in the dialogue.
Well, the industry appreciates that, Gary, and I mean that. So now let's come back to full circle, back to what you do for education.
Yeah.
Think about this as if you were talking classes at VCU or just someone that's a young person who listen to this program, want to get some direction for where they should go. These young professionals, these students of design who are thinking, what direction should I head? What's my pathway? How do I find that pathway?
I think that's the hardest thing for a designer, is to figure out where you really want to be. I had a vision of what I wanted to do, and I started looking at designers that I admired, and I read everything I could possibly read about their careers, how they had built those careers, what they stood for, what their philosophies were. Mark Hampton was someone who was monumentally important to me. I've had the privilege of getting to know his daughter, Alexa. It's a great thing to do initially, is just to learn the history and who were the people that shaped your industry, and you start to figure out what values are going to be your values, things they state that are important, and you think, I feel that way. So that's really important. Internships, our firm and many, many firms do this. We really love having interns in our office. We love the opportunity to mentor them. They give back, but it's really about grooming the next generation. So if you're a student, absolutely do an internship. It should be required by your program, but do perhaps more than you're required to do. Go to industry events, go to ASID events, go to NEWH events, go to ISFD events.
Yeah.
Go to those events.
Come to markets.
Come to market. The more you can interface and get to know people and do collect cards and try to find out how you can contribute to that person's career. Is there something that you know or that you can offer? So you have to make it not always about getting what you want. You have to think about, how can I support the industry? How can I benefit someone else? And I think if you do that, you start to create a very positive relationship with your colleagues, and people will seek you out and create opportunities for you. So it's really about giving back. I think that's an important lesson. And then get that first job.
Yeah.
Try to get a job with a firm that you admire and that you like. My firm, incidentally, has openings in all 3 offices, Orlando, D.C., and Richmond.
Very good.
Selflessly promoting here.
Nothing wrong with that.
You know, all of the top firms in the country are looking for talent right now. And so figure out where you fit and try to get in with that firm. And go there and be open, be an open vessel, observe, listen, and you'll start to find the things that resonate with you, and you'll find your authentic voice as a designer.
Yeah.
You really will.
It's not always the immediate corner office with a view of the flagpole that gets you all that you need to have to put inside to become.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, I'm an advocate of paying your dues.
Yeah.
And working hard. This is a hard industry. I do say to some young designers, if you're looking for something that's lots of PR and glitz and glamour, you've chosen the wrong industry. You should probably exit now. I think social media has given us the sense that it is a glamorous industry. I don't deny that. I've had lots of fun in my career, but there's also a lot of hard work that goes into it. A lot of long hours, schedules, deadlines, budgets, all those ugly words. Value engineering is a phrase you're going to learn.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the one we all hate.
Oh, yeah.
It's the one we all hate.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are lots of aspects that are difficult, but if you stay engaged with the industry, build a strong sort of coalition with your colleagues and with the industry itself, with the manufacturers, keep all that positive, you'll have a spectacular career, but you do have to put the effort in.
Gary, thank you very much for your time, your
pleasure.
talent, your energy, and your inspiration today. We really appreciate you being on the show.
So great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And I am ISFD.
Design Between the Lines is produced by Element Studio with the International Society of Furniture Designers. We record in High Point, North Carolina. To find videos of these podcasts, be sure to subscribe to the International Society of Furniture Designers YouTube channel. To learn more about ISFD, visit isfd.org. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more industry stories of design between the lines.